Ready? All right, good evening, everyone. I'll go ahead and call to order this governing body meeting for April 21st, 2015. We have an agenda before us. I know of, excuse me, at least two changes. Councilmember Rischel, I'd like to recommend we defer the minutes of April 14th to the next meeting. You had a question about those meetings minutes, so I'd recommend we defer those and make those discussion item for the May 5th regular meeting. And I'd also recommend that we defer item 7A, city attorney contract, until the May 5th regular meeting. Any other modifications to the agenda?
I do request one closed meeting for governing body only.
Okay, and I think we can cover under this citation. Is that accurate? Item 1?
Let's see, I have, if it's personnel. Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, it can be covered.
Okay.
We already have that in the
Okay,
motion.
so we have the citation, so we should be good.
Okay, just
Okay.
wanted to make sure.
All right, with those amendments, I'll call for a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. If we could all rise for a moment of silence, and then Michael, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 3 is citizen time. I understand we have some folks signed up to speak. First, we have Jacob. Jacob, give us your name and address, please.
I'm Jacob Kirkland. I live on 9313 Brandon Street.
Okay, great. What do you got for us tonight?
I want to talk to you about my concerns regarding the budget and some other things I've seen on television lately. The things I want to mention all relate to how budget impacts kids. I saw the presentation regarding the pool, and I am worried that you are raising the price of the pool will make it harder for myself, my friends, and to get our parents to pay for us to go, when it basically is right in the neighborhood of many of my classmates. It certainly is a better place to go than other places such as the park or 7-Eleven. I think a better idea would have the price for people who live here in Manassas Park and another slightly higher price for those who do not. I'm also concerned about the money coming to our schools. Kids work hard and so do teachers. It is really hard to learn everything you need in 5th grade when there are so many kids in each group class. I think we need more teachers. I'm hoping you do everything you can make for it easier for teachers and students by putting fewer of us in a class. I'm also concerned about some of the ideas I've heard regarding social services. This is an important department for kids in the city. For kids like my brother, it is the way they begin to get services to stay in our home and community. For kids who have been abused, it is a way that all children in the community are protected through Child Protective Services. Manassas Park has done a great job of helping and protecting kids. I know the city of Manassas has not done as good a job in this particular area in protecting kids from child abuse. Knowing this, I don't know why Manassas Park would consider moving us to the city of Manassas. They aren't going to do it for free, and I promise you they will not care for our kids the same way our department does. So much of what I've seen on television and heard makes me wonder. They say children are the future. How are you caring for the future if you make it harder for kids to have fun, learn, and be cared for and protected in their community? If any of you want to talk to me about my concerns, I would be happy to make an appointment with you. Thank you for your time.
All right.
Jacob.
Jacob, thank you very much. Thank you for having the courage to go to the podium. I know I don't like to have a mic stuck in my face like that, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you.
And then we have Ms. Think.
Well, I have to follow him down.
Got an
Good evening. I am Debbie Dank. I've taught in the school system close to, 38 years. And I am president of Manassas Park. Education Association, and that is just about 125 teachers. My colleagues and I are here tonight to urge you to please support our 2015-16 school budget. As you are well aware, our schools are operating with less money than we received in 2010, even with all the state and federal mandates for our increasingly growing special populations. However, teacher salaries, which many of you worked very hard to get to be more equitable with neighboring systems, are once again the lowest in Northern Virginia. This is a reputation that I hoped would never happen again here. The school system is the shining star of this community. Teachers who communicate with parents, in some cases a daily, weekly, monthly basis, hear continually that families move here to attend our beautiful schools and to be educated by a quality staff. But with our degrading salary scale, MPA and I am hearing many teachers reconsidering starting their careers here. We hear that there is no business, no tax base to adequately fund our schools. This must change if we expect to retain that high quality of educational services that we provide now. Teachers must begin to see that funding the school budget is the priority in this city, as are teacher salaries. Our schools may always look good, but parents and children, students, need to be reassured that the staff working there is the best we can find, hire, and more importantly, retain. We spend a lot of money bringing new teachers here, but they start to see the situation and they move to a school system 5 minutes away to make thousands more dollars. Please, we know, just like in our hearts, children are first. But once again, MPEA believes this cannot happen if teachers are put last. Please fund the school budget sufficiently enough to provide a more substantial cost of living increase for the staff. Help us keep our reputation with the community and with our very own staff and teachers. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 4, presentations. 4A, If I Were Mayor, an essay by Logan Kurtz, Manassas Park Middle School Region 5 winner. Logan's here, right? Yes. Come on up, Logan. I understand you're going to read your essay for us. First of all, congratulations on being a winner.
Thank you.
And we are all ready to hear you read your speech. It looks awesome.
Okay, so do I just start?
Go ahead, please.
Do I-
Why don't you want to share a little background? I'm going to show. So this was Virginia Town and City magazine. The governor presented 8 awards for winning entries in the Virginia Municipal League essay contest. And so there were only 8 award winners, and the title was If I Were Mayor. And so Logan is going to tell us what she would do if she were mayor.
Okay. What would I do if I was the mayor? If people were asked this question, especially in my age group, they'd have all sorts of answers. Some would build amusement parks based around themselves. Others would say something even sillier, like banning little siblings from their rooms or citywide holidays. Although these ideas may seem extreme and definitely what other students would enjoy, being mayor has nothing to do with actions like that. Being a mayor deals with solving problems and accomplishing goals that would benefit everyone for the better. First of all, I'd make a balance of housing and natural areas in the city. There are about 60 new students in my school, and they're still building houses. Of course, it's great to have so many new people in the city, but in order to construct the houses, they had to cut down lots of trees. I would plant more trees in another area to make up for the trees, making Manassas Park a better place to live. I would also add a sidewalk that leads to schools. Many students walk to school even though there's no sidewalk. There's just some loose rocks that form a path, but it's still very unsafe. For the sake of the students, I'd get a grant to build the sidewalk. Then students will still have a way to get to school even if they miss the bus, if their parents are unable to drive them. Another action I would take as mayor is to work with the local school board and raise the salaries of teachers, police officers, and firemen. The average starting salary for teachers is about $36,700 a year, which is too small for the amount of work that they do. Firefighters and police officers also get a small amount, with only about $47,500 annually. They help our community for the better and deserve to be treated with higher salaries and respect from the people they serve. I want to make sure that they get the thanks they deserve for helping the city. I would also enforce recycling throughout the city. I care deeply about making the city more environmentally friendly. Recycling would be a great way to help. Manassas Park is already taking great steps forward in this direction by putting recycling bins in every classroom. And the elementary school is using actual silverware so that they could stop throwing out so much plastic. It is great that the schools are environmentally friendly, but once students leave, they might continue to throw recyclable objects away. As mayor, I would make recycling available to everyone. I would make the services free so more people would start to do it. There is more to being mayor than amusement parks, silly laws, and mansions. Mayors help out with real problems and work for the people.
All right, thank you very much. Hang on,
Logan, come on.
We have a little something for you. First, why don't you come up here at the podium? First, thank you, that was very well done. I love the essay. And the good news is the mayor's not here, so I can tell you. So talk to him when he gets back. I'm sure you have a copy of this, but this is a copy of the magazine. So there's an extra copy for you. And here is a plaque for you. City of Manassas Park recognizes Logan Kurtz on her outstanding achievement of being selected winner of Region 5 in the If I Were Mayor essay contest. Given this 21st day of April 2015, it's signed by the mayor.
And I think
Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
Isn't that cute?
Okay, we have a proclamation. Month of May, Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month. I know Ms. Mary Howell's here to receive this, so in light of that, let me take a moment and I'll read the proclamation. Whereas Virginia's climate and scenery make motorcycle riding an attraction in the beautiful state of Virginia, and riders consider our roadways to be some of the best for riding, whereas motorcycles are increasingly used as regular means of transportation, and whereas the motorcycle is an energy-efficient vehicle that reduces fuel consumption, traffic, and parking congestion, whereas the motorcycle is an important form of transportation for commuting, touring, and recreation and on Virginia roadways, and whereas as a matter of safety, it's necessary to develop appropriate driving habits to handle these vehicles on Virginia roadways, and whereas to prevent injuries and deaths on Virginia's roadways, motorcyclists and motorists must be vigilant in their efforts to share the road and ensure the safety of everyone. And whereas Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month raises public awareness for a lifetime of safe motorcycle riding, whereas the International Women's Motorcycle Club Leather and Lace MC is committed to increasing the safe operation of motorcycles by promoting rider safety education programs. Their goal is to alert the motorists of Manassas Park in Virginia to share the road. And whereas Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month is designed to increase public awareness about motorcycles and encourage their safe and proper use among motorcycle riders, now therefore, Brian Polk, Vice Mayor of City of Manassas Park and the great state of Virginia, in recognition of over 195,700 registered motorcyclists statewide, and in recognition of the continued role of the Leather and Lace MC as a promoter of motorcycle safety, education, and awareness, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2015 as Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month in the City of Manassas Park, and ask all citizens to join in a concerted effort to promote awareness, mutual respect, and safety on our roads. Proposed for consideration for a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
A motion and a second to pass the proclamation. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Ms. Howe, I have the proclamation for you, if you come up. Come up, and I don't know if you wanted to say a few words or not. Feel free. Two little ones get up.
Oh, okay. Well, as you know, my name is Mary, and I have my sisters Lisa with me and Chris, and we represent Leather and Lace Motorcycle Club. We are an all-women international club. We have members inside and outside of the United States, and it is our goal to promote awareness and safety for all riders on the roads. So I really appreciate you accepting my proclamation.
All right, thank you very much, Mary. Thank you. Okay. We have item 4B, presentation, school board approved 2016 budget. Brenda.
Hello, Mayor. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. I'm so excited that this is up and running. This is usually the worst part for me, is getting this moving. Of course, it's not on the screen yet. I shouldn't say anything, right? Well, while this is coming up, I do want to, first of all, thank members of the governing body. I think 4 of you were able to attend a work session that we had a couple of weeks ago on the budget. I appreciate all of you being very curious and asking questions and being very involved in this process. That's how it should be. We should be doing this together. We're one city, and I appreciate the collaboration that we've had thus far. What I'm about to show to you is not exactly where either of us would like to be, but it is where we are. And so I did want to recognize, I know that we've done a lot of hard work together to try to get to this spot, and I'll explain it as best I can how we got to what we voted on last night, which is our school board adopted budget. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about the budget process. I think this is important just for a second because we took the current open positions, meaning ones that we already have but we just haven't filled yet, as well as ones that we know we're going to be putting out as positions. We then modified the rates based on what we know our healthcare costs are, our unemployment insurance costs, workers' comp, all of those things. But then we went to a zero-based budget for all materials and supplies. We basically said to the entire school system, it doesn't matter what you had last year, you need to tell us the minimum you can get by with next year. So we did start with a zero-based budget, and that is the way that we have been budgeting most recently because we find it to be the way that we can serve the most resources. And then finally, we took a look at our utility expense trends, electric, water, all of those things, and added that into the budget as well. We then took a look at our staffing needs based on ratios. You guys have seen our projections before about the number of students that we're expected to come in. So we took a look at where they fall in each of the classrooms and each of the grades, and we estimated the overall enrollment based on and the special populations, and then took a look at the ratios that we thought would come out for each classroom. So then we reviewed and adjusted based on that because the costs changed for some things, and then it made us have to adjust the cost for others. All right, so 73% of our budget, I believe, is in staffing. And so that's what you're going to see mostly reflected here. Every one of the positions that we passed to add is legally obligated. So it's either through the class size reduction initiative or it's through the standards of quality that Virginia requires. Now, some of these actually have financial penalties. Well, they're not penalties. We receive funding based on them. This one in particular, we receive $600,000. If we don't meet this goal, we actually lose money. So we added 7 elementary teachers. Those are homeroom teachers. We added 2 middle school teachers, both in math and in Spanish. Again, those are standards of quality. We added 5 high school teachers. Our high school is exploding in numbers, and we need to hit those ratios in order to meet the standards of quality for the different main subject areas. So in English, we needed to add some, and then 1 each in math, science, and social studies. We also had to add a CTE position on standards of quality again, and our OSHA requirements. We also have now gotten, our high school population has now gotten to the point where we are legally required to have an assistant principal, a second assistant principal. So we had to add that again to meet the standards of quality. We need 1 library media specialist, that's an SOQ, 4 media center assistants. These are all what you know as library personnel. It's now media center because, of course, libraries, the old way we talked about it. And so 4 media center assistants. All of these, again, are required under the Virginia Standards of Quality. When you look at division staff, again, we have a third of our school system at the moment is English as a second language population. And so these are English language learners, and the Standards of Quality require that we need 17 full-time equivalent positions for each 1,000 students identified as having limited English proficiency. This 4 is what gets us to the legal ratio. We also need a half-time speech pathologist in order to meet the other legal obligations that we have around the individual education plans that we have. Okay, so what does all of this mean? There's a lot of numbers there. So if you take a look at the operating amounts, they're the total of the school's general operating and federal funds. They're recurring costs, which are primarily 81%, salaries and benefits. The requested city transfer listed here is $583,578 over the transfer that we budgeted for FY15. Okay. Now, the capital fund contains the fund balance or the reserve that the schools have accumulated over the past few years. As you know, these funds are intended to cover unplanned emergency repairs to capital equipment. They also can be used to fund capital or other one-time expenditures as we need them in budget gaps. So the balance peaked at about $3.2 million at the end of FY14. As all of you know, we all negotiated with this last year. And in order to balance our budget last year, we used $620,000 of that money on capital expenses. Now this year, to get to the budget gap that we've just said, the budget gap is $583,000, although we have been told for sure that you can supply $250,000. So it's $333,000 over what we had been told. But that, in order to get it down to just that amount, we had to take another $900,000 out of our fund balance. That is literally every single capital expense that exists in the school system, meaning that there is no place else to go with the fund balance because we cannot use the fund balance for recurring expenses. That's a very dangerous slope to go down because if the money's not there next year, we're suddenly laying off teachers that we hired. So we have literally taken every single expense we can and taken it out of fund balance to get this down. At one point, I know when we first started talking, we said our delta was $2 million, and we've gotten it down to now where we are. So just to talk about these other funds in case you have questions about them. So the Medical Trust Fund was established to cover the cost of retiree medical subsidies. With the high retirement rates in the past few years, this fund is actually expected to pay $30,000 a year for the next several years. We don't have any new funds being deposited into this account since FY10, and at this rate, the balance funding this account will be depleted in FY18. So we're going to need to figure out a way, again, through our budget to be able to refund that, because we do still have retirees that we're going to need to serve. And then I also want to mention the food services. Our food services operate without a subsidy from any of the general school operating funds. It actually pays for itself. So barring any unexpected major equipment failures, the food services organization is expected to increase its fund balance. This balance will be used in FY17 for any capital expenses specifically that they need. Okay, so I want to talk just again about the use of capital funds and how we used them. So last year, as I mentioned, we had, I guess it was 3.169 to be exact. And of that, 193 was spent on technology improvements. We had 256 on bus leases, and those cooling towers that we worry about, one of them in fact did need to be replaced. That was $170,000. So in 2016, we are having to replace many, many textbooks, and that's $180,000. We have technology at $322, more bus lease purchase payments, although not everything that we need, at $224, and then capital replacement costs for desks and other things that are ready to be replaced. So that's our ending balance. Now, just so you can see, so the FY unplanned expenses that we need to save what is, let me go back, 1.6 left. So as a reminder, we took it down by $600,000 last year to 2.5. We're now down to 1.6. So what we know we're probably going to end up spending it on this year on unplanned expenses, except they're anticipated. We have aging boilers. We have another cooling tower. We know we're going to need HVAC repairs, and we also have aging roofing. And all of those things will need to be replaced. We also are expecting that we will have to deal with bus replacement sometime during the middle of the year as well. In addition, that money that's left needs to be used for future bus lease payments or purchases to make sure that we're staying in the rotation and our buses remain safe. Continued implementation of the technology, equipment maintenance, and then athletic field and equipment repair and replacement, which we have not done in quite a while. So those are what we are expecting to use what's left in the fund balance to do. Okay, so this total budget amount is derived by combining the higher of the expenditures or revenues from every fund. For the operations, the amounts are the same. The capital and medical trust use fund balance, so the expenditure amount is used, but for food services, the revenues are used. Okay, so here's the final budget. So federal and operations is $38,727,895. We have a $1.1 million capital budget, $28,000 in medical trust, and $1.8 million in food services. Our total budget for adoption is $41,771,773. Now, I do want to give you just one more piece of information that we haven't shared in the past, and that is our timeline. So one of the things that we have invested in as far as resources is having a more robust teacher recruitment effort. We had not done it in several years because we just didn't have the funds to do so, and we were finding that it was very hard to get candidates. We were often signing candidates in at the end of August, candidates who had interviewed other places and had not found employment. That's not been the most successful tactic for us. So last year and this year, we've actually gone out and done some recruiting and found some amazing candidates. But what happens is if you're an amazing candidate, maybe Manassas Park looks great to you, but we offer you a letter of intent, you get 3 others. If we cannot offer you a contract until the middle of June because our budget hasn't been approved, then we lose out. So while we do not need the formal budget approved, we do need to know how much money we are receiving from the city in order to get our letters of intent out. So what's helpful to us is if we can get that final number from you by May 15th so that we can distribute contracts on May 16th, both to our existing teachers but also the teachers that we have hanging, so that we can make sure that we keep the quality teachers that we've gone to the trouble to recruit. So here I am, and I am not alone, so if you have questions, and I won't be able to probably answer all of them, if you have them, let's hear them. Anybody?
Okay, any questions?
I have a question, and I discussed this before about the salaries of the teachers. I know the scale is a 30-step scale, and I don't see compression in that scale. Is there any movement to compress that to a 15 or 20-step system?
We haven't talked about that, and that, maybe you want to answer that, Chris.
Yeah, I think that's it. Bruce?
We did that at one time here. We did compress our salary scale. That was, what, 20 years ago, 25 years
30
ago.
years seems a long time to get the top pay, to me.
Yeah.
So we have done a few things to chop off some pieces. During the recession, the salary scale was increased actually to 33 steps, and so that has been reduced. Yes. That has been reduced to 30. At this point in time, there are really not a whole lot of steps that are unoccupied. There is some compression around year 4, 5, and 6 because during the recession we simply dropped the beginning salary by about $200 each year.
When we bring in a teacher, where's the...
Let me ask this, because we're losing the folks at home. For whoever's likely to answer a question, Krista?
I'm sorry, I didn't
Just want to make sure it's on the record for the folks at home. Thank you, Krista.
What is the medium step that teachers come in at? Are they like at step 5 or 6 or 3, or is it all over the board on average?
Well, what it should be for a teacher coming out of college is step 1, depending on what their master's, bachelor's plus 15. We do have the different columns that add a 3, 6, 7.
I've seen that. Just step
amount.
1 seems 30 years out seems a very long time to get the top pay to me. I'd like to see some compression in that. So I don't know, just something to look at in the future years.
You have other questions? Preston?
What you know? I'm still writing. last year you guys hired a math coordinator position,
We did.
and how did that work? I mean, do you
Well, we're
need?
just in, as you can imagine, we're only about 8 months into it. It seems to be working very well. Last night, we passed adoption of a new math program for K through 5 that she is now going to make sure is implemented. All of those tactics are also implemented at the 6 through 12 level. So without that, that would have been a much harder bridge to much harder to bridge that gap. So we're really excited about the work that's being done there. Will we see results in the SOLs? I hope so, but it has only been a few months.
Jeanette, please.
Could you review the timeline that makes it necessary to offer contracts by May 15th? Could you go over that timeline and elaborate on it?
State code for this. This is the date.
No, for this.
Right.
State code actually directs when cities and counties are to provide that information to schools. And for cities, it is, I believe, May 15th or 30 days after the numbers are received by the state. So for example, last year when they didn't close out their budget discussions until beginning of June, there was nothing that you all could do until you know kind of what that money is about. Okay. So since those budget discussions have been closed, then we would hope that we would receive that information. There's a different date for counties, and I believe that's the 30th.
Okay.
But isn't teachers are recruited as early as in December?
Well, we begin the recruiting trips in January and February, and we don't even put out letters of, we did our first letters of intent last week. So, so teachers have them in their hands, and again, that's great, but they're going to get them from others as well. And, a bird in the hand, as you know, if you've got if somebody offers you a contract and you still have a letter of intent on, it doesn't really matter how much you love them, you want a job. So, in order to be competitive, we do not want to lose these teachers, not to mention the fact that we also want to make sure that we have a sense of what teachers are staying here, and we don't want to wait until the middle of June to let them know exactly whether they're coming back, because school will already be out by then.
Why do we wait till January instead of December?
That's just when the recruiting fairs are for schools.
Okay. And we can give them like a letter of intent, or okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Suresh, please.
So, a couple of months ago, when we were discussing that new school calendar year, right? There were certain numbers which were thrown out, regarding the cost impact of adopting that new school calendar year. And I think, at this point, the only thing which has been decided is that school begins on August 17th for school year 15 to 16, correct?
That's right. And then we have 2 intersessions as well.
Okay. As part of your budget process, did you iron out what was the final cost impact of, the new school year?
Well, the final cost impact, because of the grant, we have every reason to believe is 0. Although the amount we'd have to be reimbursed is how much?
The last amount that we had for reimbursement was about $150,000, but really what we'll need to do is when Mr. Neff finishes with the interviews for the district-wide coordinator and the school-based coordinators, and those positions are chosen next week, they'll get into planning more of the details. So specifically, how many field trips might we need, or how much transportation might we need for students who are doing job shadowing out in the community, or doing those extension type activities. What resources do we need for remediation that we would need to purchase additionally? And then we will make the grant application. But what we've taken a look at is all of the other schools who have received those grant funds, both this year for those that began the program this year and for ones that are in their second year of the program. And we have every reason to believe that we would receive those funds. Funding is set at a maximum of $300,000 per school, not division.
Okay. So the bottom line is, you are expecting that, you will get reimbursed 100% for all the cost impact.
100% this year and potentially next year.
This year and next year.
Yes, right.
Yes, this year and next year.
But then after that, one of the things that we've done is taken a look at what we're gaining by doing that. So for instance, summer school this year is already going to be 3 weeks instead of 4. And so we may get to a point where summer school isn't an issue because we're doing what we need to do during the school year. So we're trying to figure out in the next 2 years what are the trade-offs so that we can still make that a 0 item and it gets absorbed into other things.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to add, I mean, I've got the summer school totals, and they're just about on par with the grant money in terms of how much you guys spend on summer school, and you also have summer school textbooks. So,
Well, it's still the same textbook.
Oh, same textbooks?
Textbook is actually materials and supplies.
okay, got it. Sorry, it's a separate category here.
That's okay.
But, okay, so it evens out kind of, almost.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. All right. Two questions real quick. One is, how much did you get SAP for healthcare increase this year?
A lot. We saw a relatively low rise in our Kaiser plan, which only had about a 6% increase. We were ecstatic with that, as it has been in the 10-11 range for the last 2 years. However, for our Anthem plans, specifically the Anthem Key Expanded plan, we saw anywhere from 6 to then 9.5% on that other plan. We did take some steps to address that, including moving from the expanded plan to the 250 plan, which provides similar benefits but does have a higher deductible for employees. However, we did our best to educate them on the differential between the premium that they would be saving versus the increase in the deductible, and that it was truly a cost savings for them. But it did cost the school division $180,000 in order to absorb those increases. And we did that because without doing so, we would have completely annihilated the 2% raise that we were looking to give for most of our employees, especially those who are the lowest paid. Can you imagine being a cafeteria worker, where your 2% raise is about $7.50 and having a $38 increase in your health care costs? That really just didn't make sense.
So you did absorb the entire increase within the school?
We by making the adjustment down to the other plan, we were able to do that. It would have cost us about $500,000 to absorb the increase if we had kept that plan the same.
Okay. The other question I had is, you said about a third of your population was English
learners.
language, ELL, and you're adding 4 ESOL teachers. What would that bring your count to?
19.
19. What's the state requirement? Is it a ratio based? Has it across the
17
schools?
per 1,000.
17 per 1,000.
Right. So essentially, since we have approximately 1,100 students, 1.1 times 17.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have.
I'm going to
Preston,
follow
go
up
ahead.
on Brian's question about your healthcare costs. That 6 to 9% increase that you experienced with with the Anthem plan, is that an anomalous? It's a deviation from the norm that you?
It's a deviation from what we have seen the last several years. We have been very blessed that that plan has remained relatively flat over time. I know because I received all the calls from people who said, I got a 2% raise, how come I'm taking home less money than I was last year? And that was from all the people who had the Kaiser plan last year, because they did absorb that cost. We actually had not changed the employer contribution for any of our health care plans in about the last 4 years. So any increases that we have had during that time have gone to the employee.
Okay. And do you know the cause of that healthcare increase? Is it because of like federal legislation, or what the change in the? I mean, we've experienced the same thing. It's a 6% increase.
Correct.
There's more politics involved in that than we can get
There
into.
is. There are some politics involved. We are involved with the same local choice healthcare plan that you participate in, which does shield us from some of the large rate increases by having a small population ourselves. However, each of the municipalities and schools does have their own rate, individual rate, and I do believe that we did have some technically bad experience this past year with a number of people who had some serious health conditions.
Okay. And my last question, or it's more like a comment. We just heard a 5th grade Logan give her essay. Mrs. Dank spoke. We have to come up with a plan to increase teacher salaries and then make it competitive with this area. I mean, I see it every year on the WABE survey, that annual survey of where they compare school divisions. and you see the teacher salaries. And it's got to be on par for revenue sharing agreement we've got to work on.
Well, and I will tell you, we're in total agreement. And, for the last several years, we've been in this, we're in it together no matter what, right? But being in it together the last several years has meant trying to figure out, okay, what can we all eke out in order to make it work? But I think that as we move forward, I think next, in the summer, we're actually going to ask if in May or June we can get together and talk about a revenue sharing agreement, what that would look like so that we can do some long-range planning. At this point, we do planning from year to year. We have no ability to do any long-range planning to say, okay, our goal this year is a 2% raise, and then next year we'll do the 3% raise because we'll do fewer buses. We can't do any of that discussion because we have no idea what money is coming down the road. So to be able to have some sense that we will get this amount, or that, we know that there's an amount that's coming. I think that's a much better. Plus, this kind of negotiation back and forth, I know is draining on everybody. Nobody wants to have to make these hard choices.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brenda. Krista?
I do want to let you know, because of the shock that I saw on Dr. McDade and Mr. Neff's faces when we discussed what the new salary scales would be in order to provide some of these letters of intent. The 2% raise does not move the starting salary, because what we have done in Manassas Park is that every year the teachers move up a step in order to prevent brand new teachers and teachers who have been there 3, 4, 5 years from being on the same step, to address that type of compression. Each of the teachers moves. So effectively the 2% raise is taking the first step, 2%, and that becomes step number 2. In order to not have a $200 delta between the steps, the gap that we had decided on was 2%. So since the raise is 2% and the delta between the first and second step is 2%, the bottom step will actually not move.
So I would guess our gap will be larger this
Right.
year.
Right. So, and Jacob?
So that is what we're hoping, along with, presenting this budget for adoption. We're going to be getting in touch with Kim and Lana to try to set up a meeting in May or June to go over what could revenue sharing look like, what works, what are other people doing, we can do some research on it, and maybe by the end of the summer we can have an agreement we can all work with so that we can move forward and be able to plan.
Yeah, in Jacob's words, we have to schedule an appointment together. I like that.
Yeah, well, he can just do my presentation next time.
All right.
Anything else? Yes, Sue House?
Yes, the final question which I have is based on, in the adopted budget, so what's the breakup? What makes up the 41,771,000, how is it broken up between state, city, federal, and any other sources of revenue? That's the first part of the question.
So that's right there. So there's local funds, there's city funds, state, and federal.
Okay.
Okay.
So the expected city transfers is about 11.7. Is that right? So there's that's a little bit different than what Kim had presented. So I think that's something which we'll have to work through to plug the gap.
Yeah, there's about a $330,000 gap.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Okay. Item 5, recognitions, we have none. Item 6 is the consent agenda. We have 2 items on consent agenda. Approval of minutes for April 7th only. Again, the April 14th minutes are being deferred to the May 5th meeting. So the consent agenda is approval of minutes of April 7th and approval of fiscal year 2015 fourth quarter appropriation for the city schools. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All's in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item 7, we no longer have any unfinished business. Item 8 is new business. 8A, Task Order 2, Engineering Services with Bowman Consulting, Connor Drive Extension.
And this is for, this is revenue sharing, a revenue sharing project, so we are eligible for reimbursement of 50% of that, and that's for the Connor Drive extension. Both that one and the next one, the Denver Drive Culvert Project, are 2 of the projects that were slated for deallocation last week, and we were able to get an extension, but we're going to be following up with them monthly to kind of see where we are on that.
Okay. You're looking for approval of those?
Approval of that task order for 112,966.71 for that one.
Okay, start with the Connor Drive one. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve task order 2.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I got a question.
Sure, go ahead, Preston.
That's Connor Drive going out to 28, right? Was that the?
From Euclid to
Wanna-
28.
Calvin can explain a little bit better.
I just want to know where the road's going, the extension.
Yeah, it's gonna go, currently, Connor Drive did extend from Euclid to 28 as a gravel roadbed once upon a time. It's been blocked off with barricades at the end of the HOA property there. And this is to actually full depth pave all the way from where the Connor Drive currently stops up to Route 28. It's being looked in as a right in, right out only.
Okay, because we've got a neighborhood right next door to it. And so that's a safety concern because cars are going to be zipping through to get on Euclid or going from Euclid to 28. So are they considering that as in terms of the speed limit or speed bumps as well, or speed tables?
But what they've been instructed to do is come to us. If you look through the proposal, there's several phases, and at 30%, we actually intend to hold a public comment period because there's also parking concerns in that area.
Yeah.
So we would like to give them an opportunity to get started with some conceptual design and then come back to the table so we can have public comment on those. We had asked for essentially 2 separate designs, one with on-street parking, one without. They'll pretty much give us concept sketches so that we can have a public comment period, let the citizens weigh in on how they feel about the different proposed methods of accomplishing this same goal. And so we're not going to rush through this, get to 60 or 90% and just say, here's the project. We're going to bring this back before the governing body at about 30% design with some different options.
Okay, and there's also a utility, like an electric tower.
There's Novak substation there.
And they're in agreement with the plans as well? Because that's gigantic.
Well, they haven't seen any plans yet. There are no plans existing for this. There's an aerial concept plan that I essentially drew where the proposed roadway would be, but until we get to 15, and we may have conceptual sketches at around 15%, because we're also asking for a hurry up on a construction estimate because we've got some potential gap in the numbers for the construction estimate. So we're pushing Bowman to come through with some sketches before 30% so that they can come up with some rough budget numbers before 30%. But we'll definitely be revisiting this before we get to 60 and 90% plans.
Thanks. And there's some barren land on the left. Do you know what that's zoned for? I know that's Prince William County, but do you just know offhand?
Prince William County. I believe once upon a time Birmingham Green had
Part of that.
planned an extension.
It's part of Birmingham Green.
Is that residential?
It's that the living facility, I guess,
Right.
or
I'm not sure if
nursing
that
facility.
entire site, I'm not sure the entire site zoning, but that's owned by Birmingham Green.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was just thinking about future development there, what's going to go up there. All right, well, if we can just have the concerns about the residents next to that portion of the extension, because I have a feeling that cars are going to be using that to go down Connor Drive from 28 and zipping through, especially the trucks that go on Connor Drive. And that might be a danger for kids or just residents there nearby.
Right. It wasn't just those speed limit concerns, but it was also the on-street parking concerns.
Right.
There is a parking need in that development, but is this the right way to help meet that parking need? I think we can all think of some spots around Manassas, Prince William County, where that on-street parking has been a nightmare. You wind up with a lot of commercial vehicles as opposed to residential vehicles.
Right.
Private use vehicles, and we want to bring that all back. Bowman has been instructed, it's in their proposal. I believe that they put it in their proposal that there will be a public comment period, and the city will lead that. When we get to 30%, we'll bring some options before the public so that they can see what we're up to.
Okay. Thanks, Calvin.
All right, thanks, Calvin. Did you have questions, Suhas, please?
Yeah. So what's driving this project,
What's driving it?
Yeah.
Well,
The
this
money
pro-
was quite a few years ago.
Yeah, this
so we'll
project's
have
been
to-
in the CIP for some time.
Right, I know, we have lots of projects on CIP, including sidewalk and Euclid and all those projects, so I'm just trying to understand, what is the urgency and what's the priority of this particular project?
The urgency right now is the potential deallocation of the funds from VDOT. I can't tell you what the impetus was for the project whenever the money was applied for years ago.
I know it was applied for many years ago. We never did anything with it, and this is just a study, and the 50% reimbursement is going to occur only after the project is completed, which may take several more years. So it's anyone's guess if we'll ever get that money or not. So I'm just trying to find out. Should we be focusing on some of the other important projects rather than trying to spend money?
It's a governing body decision.
Yeah, I know, so-
We had the grant, and we were we were told the money would be taken away, so
Right.
we were trying to move forward to make sure it wasn't.
I'll say that it takes less congestion or pressure off Manassas Drive to 28, Connor Drive extension possibly, as well as the more roads you have connecting to your city and through your city, the better it is in terms of business coming and just for transportation. You don't want that one road, Manassas Drive, being the only road that goes through your city. You want secondary roads as well. And so this provides that, as long as it's safe for the residents nearby. But I think this is a good project to have for the future of our city and also for Manassas Drive and it relieving the congestion on.
One quick
So-
question. Jeanette, go ahead,
So
please.
this was one of the projects in danger of being deallocated?
Correct.
Okay.
The
When
other-
was the funding first applied for?
The original funding application was sent in FY 2012.
2012,
Yes.
okay.
And it takes some time to get the agreements, all the Appendix A's and everything arranged and executed. Probably the actual funding agreement was executed around October, November of 2012.
Okay.
Calvin, not to drag you too much into design, right out, right in, right out.
Right.
People going south on 28, will they still be able to do a U-turn, but they won't be able to turn left onto Connor, or will that be closed?
Well, that's going to be for
Part of the
Bowman to
design.
present
Okay,
ideas. Do I think it's going to happen? No. I feel more or less this is going to just be truly a right in, right out, and there will be no ability to make any left turn movement, because when the goal here would be to avoid signalization. We already have signalization issues along that corridor, and another signal's not going to help things at all.
yeah, okay, yeah, I get that they're designing, as I read through it, that wasn't clear, so,
Yeah.
okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
So this is also one of the projects for which we are at risk to lose funding, the state funding. Is that?
One of the projects for which we did what?
No, I'm asking. Is this one of the projects for which we'll be losing funding if we don't execute on this one? Is there any date on that?
Well, I had forwarded you guys, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the email that I forwarded from last week. They're going to be checking in with us on a monthly basis to see how we are progressing with this. And we'll look at it again. They'll look at it again in 3 months or 6 months, and they could decide at a later point, if we're not moving forward, that they're going to take back any money that we haven't spent.
How much funding have we received from the state on this so far? Because I see this 112, and then I see a 50% reimbursement. So it looks like we are spending 112,000, and then we are expecting to receive 50% reimbursement from the state. Is that right?
That would be correct.
Okay.
Half of that would be reimbursed.
Yes, and there was also a 2012 PRTC motor fuels tax resolution for the other 50% of what was in the VDOT Appendix A. So if the $400,000 project budget were to hold true, 50% would come from VDOT, 50% would come from PRTC motor fuels tax.
Well, PRTC motor fuels tax doesn't have much money left, because of the gas prices being so low.
I don't know what that balance is.
Um,
I know.
I do have a copy of the December spreadsheet from PRTC.
It might be our funds, because we have a lot, because we haven't spent any.
Yeah, we do have quite a unencumbered balance in PRTC, and that's aside from the encumbered balance that this project's a part of. This project is actually a part of the encumbered balance shown in our PRTC motor fuels tax budget, because the resolution for this project was done immediately following the revenue sharing resolution.
Okay. I'll go ahead and call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
One oppose.
One opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries 4-1. Move on to item 8B, similar conversation, task order number 3, services agreement on the Denver Drive Culvert Improvement Project.
And that one's for 75,024.07, and it's same thing. It's one of the VDOT revenue sharing projects that was up for discussion last week.
Okay, is there a motion on this one?
Motion to approve task 2, or task order 3, excuse me.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Does this clean up those railroad ties down there, or no?
The railroad ties?
The curb. The curbs. This doesn't do anything with that, is it? The curbs that we used in the drainage ditch, just doesn't cover anything with that. This is just the roadway to
Actually,
take care of the...
Are you speaking of some of the concrete
Yes.
blocks that was installed? Some of it may be subject to change, because a goal that Bowman has been tasked with is to try and avoid a CLOMA or LOMA process, which can set the project construction way back. So in order to do that, they may be spreading a lot of riprap, trying to keep from impacting the stream bed. So again, we won't know exactly.
Might be able to cover some of it up.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Any other questions on this one? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item 8B, Councilmember Rischel, you were going to let us...
Thanks, Calvin.
No, yeah, thanks, Calvin. You were going to let us know whether we needed to move forward with any action tonight on the resolution?
Yes, I would like to have this in the can, so to speak,
Okay.
and I would not bring it out unless there is any chance that the parking expansion at the VRE would be postponed another year. I think it's important to get the study done, get the preliminary engineering done, and then the sooner the better.
Okay.
And there was discussion at the last meeting about downgrading that particular project on the project list and funding next year instead of this year.
Okay, so this resolution is to oppose downgrading that project that would directly
Correct,
impact
for the
us.
various for the various reasons that are outlined in the
It
resolution.
wouldn't even be a year, it'd be 2
And-
years, correct?
Beg your pardon?
It would be downgraded 2 years, correct? Not even 1 year.
Yeah.
And that's,
They are having a call for projects. It's my understanding that it would be rolled over onto next year's list. As to when that funding would come
Right.
through,
I appreciate all your work on this. It's ridiculous that we've been waiting this long and our residents have been waiting this
It
long
is
for this.
ridiculous.
It's ridiculous
Yeah,
and
it is.
extreme. That
Yeah.
overflow is 125%.
Uh-huh.
Our residents need a parking garage, and it should have been built 5 years ago. So I agree with you, and I appreciate you putting this together.
yeah. And if you would read it so the folks at home would know the
Okay.
points, the talking points.
Sure, I'll be happy to. The resolution reads, whereas Manassas Park has become aware of suggestions at the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority that may possibly downgrade the VRE parking expansion in Manassas Park from a funded project to an unfunded project, whereas Manassas Park understands that the ridership of the VRE is projected to increase in the future, whereas Manassas Park believes that a considerable percentage of Manassas Park VRE station users are from Prince William County, whereas Manassas Park understands there will be multiple sources of funding for the construction phase, and therefore the NVTA will not be expected to be the sole funding entity, whereas Manassas Park believes that the VRE parking expansion will help to alleviate congestion on Route 28 by having an undetermined number of drivers elect to take the VRE if they can find accessible parking, Whereas Manassas Park believes this expansion is warranted due to the future growth and development that is projected for Manassas Park and surrounding jurisdictions. Whereas the Manassas Park VRE parking expansion was downgraded after the public comment period concluded, thereby removing the ability of parking expansion supporters to publicly comment and to publicly oppose the downgrade. Whereas 3 other different and unrelated projects were upgraded to fund status for a total of $8 million, likewise occurring after the public comment period ended. Whereas the Manassas Park VRE parking expansion study, which includes preliminary engineering, is only $500,000. Whereas the amount of the NVTA fiscal year 15-16 70% regional revenue unprogrammed funds remaining is about $25 million. Whereas the funding downgrade of the transit study will affect the highway to transit ratio at a time when the Northern Virginia region as a whole should be encouraging transit. Now therefore be it resolved that Manassas Park respectfully requests that the Manassas Park VRE parking expansion study, which includes preliminary engineering, be kept as a funded project on the current list, thereby not incurring any delay.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
And I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Clarification, Jeanette, would you like it conditioned such that you have discretion depending on what transpires between now and when action is taken?
Yes, if I could have the original with the mayor's signature on, I will make sufficient copies, take it with me to the next NVTA meeting. If this topic arises, if we're in danger of being downgraded, our funding being downgraded, I'll have the copies ready to present, pass out to the membership. If all goes well in our favor, then I come home and I don't even mention the resolution. So.
Perfect. Okay with providing that discretion as part of the motion to make the real-time decision?
Yeah.
So let me just ask a question. What is the risk if we just send this resolution? Because there is nothing negative in this. We're just basically asking respectfully to keep it funded in the list, right?
Because between the time that I first requested the resolution and tonight, I received tentative verbal agreement that our project would not be downgraded. So rather than to, I don't know, send ripples, cause a ripple in the force, I thought I would just be prepared, have this in my back pocket, so to speak.
When is the meeting where that would be concluded?
Thursday
This
evening.
coming Thursday?
Yes, yes. Yes.
No.
So the risk would be Jeanette's in the awkward position of presenting it, and it turns up on the agenda to preserve it.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
awkward positioning, I think,
Yeah.
is the risk.
It's all about timing, and like she said, you don't want to change the momentum that it's shifted back towards funding the project. What they have to understand is this is the, if not the most, one of the most regional projects that MVTA has on that list that benefits more than just one jurisdiction, because you have citizens from Prince William County, Manassas City, and Fairfax County using the VRE parking lot. And so it benefits not only us, but everyone and most people in MVTA. But they've got to understand that. And
Well, I've made it clear that since they have an unprogrammed fund balance of $25 million, they can spend $500,000 on our study.
right.
And that's exactly why I was thinking, instead of waiting, if we send this resolution in advance, it's worded, pretty nicely. Janet, thanks for crafting it. It's been very respectful, but then I think, we would get ahead of this one by sending this resolution on behalf of the entire governing body. Plus, we could also follow up with phone calls to the NVTA members, and we could probably lobby. That's what I was looking at it.
Well, the lobbying would have to take place over 48 hours, and I don't think that's possible because today's Tuesday and the meeting is Thursday. And I think the timing of this, it is best taken and presented if needed. I doubt it will be needed, but like I said, I wanted to have it in the can.
Okay.
Could I make a comment too? We tend to beat the drums a lot too, and it's if there is ever a situation where it's not necessary for us to beat the drums, it might make it so that they're heard better the next time that we have to.
Thank you.
So
We've done some drum beating lately, so. Yeah.
And
Okay, so
Okay,
just.
I'm okay with that.
Maker of the motion second.
Second.
Comfortable with
Yeah.
discretion?
Yes,
Okay.
the motion. I'm comfortable with
All right, with that clarification, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously, and we're on to manager's report.
Nothing for open session.
Okay.
Good.
All right, and then I think we're going to move on to budget discussion. I know we have a few items in closed meeting. Next up, though, is budget discussion fiscal year 16. I think we were going to focus on proffers and.
Proffers and fund balance.
Fund
Gary,
balance.
if you want to come up. Did you put this on their spots?
yes.
Okay, so at your seats, Gary has provided a summary of the changes that we've made thus far since the budget was presented, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about this stuff.
Yeah, at last week's meeting, we talked about funding of the additional schools transfer, whether it should come from proffers and fund balance. For the most part, I said quite a bit of what I had to say there. Vice Mayor asked for some clarification on fund balance and proffers. I'm not an expert on proffers, but I've been doing fund balance for a long time. Before I get into this, and I had a discussion with Krista yesterday, and they heard this. I do not want anything I say tonight to be taken as anti-schools. I am pro-schools. I am pro-police department, pro-fire department, pro-city. I live in the city, and the concerns that these people voiced tonight for their teachers, we have the same concerns for our public safety people who have, a very difficult time holding on to employees here. So the first thing I was going to say, there's a book published by the pamphlet by the GFOA. It's an elected guides official to fund balance and net assets. I gave this out, I believe, a year or so after I first got here, so it was 10 years ago. A lot of y'all don't have it. I would be happy to get this to you. It's very dry. Again, if you have trouble sleeping at night, put this by your bedside and it will help you sleep. So I'm not, again, fund balance, I don't want to get into an accounting 101 discussion here or finance 101, but in essence, and again, I think accountants and the accounting profession tends to overcomplicate accounting for some reason, I guess, to make it look, more difficult. It's not that difficult. Most of y'all have probably heard the term equity. Equity is simply, from an accounting standpoint, it's your assets minus your liabilities. It's the ownership. If you look at it from a business standpoint, it's the ownership in a business. There's retained earnings out there in corporations that people deal with. In a governmental entity, we do fund balance. And again, we've discussed this before. A fund is a set of books. And again, at a business, you have one set of books. Here in the city, we have half a dozen funds. The school has half a dozen different funds. Each has its own set of books. And in that case, each of those, there's assets and liabilities. The difference between assets and liabilities in a governmental entity is called fund balance. It's not referred to as equity. So it's the, again, net assets of the fund, what's left over. Again, what I discussed last week and what I said, and again, I fully support this school as a citizen. I guess I have to be careful, finance director versus citizen, but I think the school should get their $333,000. Y'all do also. Y'all have already, I guess, approved that. The topic is, how are we funding it? My comment last week was that these were their fund balance is funds that have previously been appropriated for operations. It's monies that, again, good for them that they didn't spend for whatever reasons, but they were appropriated for school operations. The school's fund balance, or the schools don't have a need for fund balance the way the city does. We have a need for fund balance as the taxing authority. We're responsible for their debt. we maintain that 15% fund balance that's set by all. And again, that's not there's no law that says we need 15%. So that school fund balance, and they showed tonight, they are utilizing that fund balance and drawing down from it. My recommendation would be that this additional $333,000 be drawn from that money. Again, I understand that it's reducing the fund balance they have. It would have the same effect on the proffer dollars. For the most part, fund balance, again, typically we look at that as one-time expenditures. However, fund balance can be used for operations. It's not, again, I don't want to, if you read this book and you see other things, it's not, you can't use it in perpetuity, but for a year or two to use it, that has happened before. If we do look at the schools as carrying that fund balance, I think we should readdress the city's fund balance. The 15%, part of our 15% is on the $18 million that we transfer. Well, again, it's the $11 million operating transfer and the $5 million of debt. I don't know the number offhand. So we're carrying a portion and reserving a portion of that fund balance back to set aside. So again, basically what I'm looking at is the operations, the original intended purpose. And I did want to read, if you'll indulge me, just a brief paragraph from this pamphlet so that it's not just my words, but I'm giving GFOA words. What is the meaning of unreserved fund balance? As just discussed, unreserved fund balance is affected, I told you this is dry, by only those financial resources that are available for spending, whereas total fund balance is affected by all financial resources regardless of their availability, blah, blah, blah. And again, there's a part of the school's operating fund balance that is reserved. It's $126,000 or $190,000 of the $3.2 million, so that only $3.1 million is unreserved. So it says, put another way, unreserved fund balance measures the amount available for new spending in the subsequent year's budget if the budget is adopted on a basis consistent with GAAP, which we do. So. And then on the flip side, on the proffers, again, I'm not an expert there, but the city attorney has weighed in. Those are amounts paid by a developer to mitigate the effects of a particular development. Those are typically capital items, the parks improvements that y'all approved. In this case, these are operating items. So that's basically all I have to say. Like I said, I'll be happy to answer any questions if possible, or get you answers. So,
Questions? Jeanette, please.
The list that you provided, I believe I had asked for, were there any proffers spent on the school system over the last 5 years? And I believe there was nothing spent on the schools from proffers over the last 5 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so 0 proffers spent on schools, and yet the schools are growing. There's growth in the school system. Also, you mentioned that the schools, you didn't think the schools needed a reserve, needed to maintain a reserve, is that?
Legally, they're not required to.
Technically, there's no requirement.
Yeah.
Again, it's the city as the taxing entity. We would levy the tax. And again, I didn't get into that aspect.
Okay.
We could discuss this, all kinds of different issues. You know, if I had my way, I'd have it like, I shouldn't say most states, but all the states I've been in, Texas, Florida, and Michigan, where school districts are a taxing authority. They're separate and apart, and they levy their own tax and answer to the taxpayers for it, instead of the way, we have it here in Virginia, where, they're a part of the city, and we have to find a solution for the problems of the city.
So,
Not that the schools are.
so
a
back to
problem
the
in this.
schools and the reserve. You're making a distinction then between need and required. Is that correct? So you said the schools, I thought you said, excuse me if I'm wrong, I thought you said the schools do not need to maintain a reserve. Or did you say the schools were not required to maintain a reserve?
The schools are not required to maintain a reserve. I do not believe the schools need a reserve.
Okay, and I'd like to hear from the schools, I'd like to hear comment from the schools regarding that, if possible.
I'm okay with a quick comment. I want to make sure we're not really in a work session format. It's more of a budget discussion for the governing body, but I'm comfortable if there was, a quick comment.
Okay.
Gary's correct. There is no requirement for the schools to carry a fund balance, and there is definitely a difference of opinion of whether they are allowed to maintain a fund balance or how that works. However, I do remember answering to Suhas about 2 weeks after I started this position and coming down and saying, we have to have more money. And Suhas said, well, what will happen if you don't get it? And my response was, I guess we won't pay our teachers in July and August. And really, that's the limit of the choices that we have. So I would respectfully request, on behalf of the school board and the school division, that we be allowed to have on our books at least a small fund balance to be used in the case of emergency or for capital or one-time initiatives. And my intent, at least, as the director of finance and the person responsible for putting together a budget with the school board and the superintendent, would be that any use of that money would be requested of the governing body and appropriately appropriated before it was used.
Thank you.
Can I make one, I guess, additional comment? Sure. And again, there is not a need, because we should fully fund the school's operations each year, the same way we do with the police and the fire. We don't have fund balances for police, we don't have fund balances for fire. So again, if we fully fund the schools with what they need, there shouldn't be a need for a fund balance. So, again, there's a difference of opinion, but I do not want it taken that I don't, I believe we should fund the schools.
But then again, we have spent zero proffer dollars on the schools. So
Correct, but we really haven't until 2015. We're not spending, we've only gotten proffer dollars for the last 2 years. So there weren't proffer dollars to spend. But yes, you're correct. We haven't spent proffer dollars out there.
Preston, did you have a comment?
Hey, Gary, how about this? It's the school's fund balance really is like a float. Because if you looked at their presentation, they've been using it year over year to pay their capital expenses. I mean, they're foreseeing buying a new bus. HVAC was on there. So I would, in a float defined, float is normally a smaller amount to pay for small expenses relative to their overall budget of $38 million. That $3 million is small. So I think it's not to play semantics here, but it's really looking at definitions. I would consider it as a float more than an unreserved fund balance.
And again, I haven't looked, that closely at their budget. I thought there was a separate funding for capital projects. If they're using the fund balance to fund their capital needs, again, that's what I'm saying. That's all part of an annual appropriation for the school's needs, including capital.
But what I would like to do, to jump back on your side of your argument, and I was mentioned this last meeting, is to account for their fund balance in our fund balance, because we didn't account for it last year for our bond rating. And I think we can do that because it's unaccounted for.
the problem I think there is we get into then we're taking the money away that was appropriated for their operations. We're taking that back in a way.
I wouldn't be taking it, just accounting for it, or
President, may I interrupt for a second? I think if we start that path, we end up on a slippery slope. The money which they have accumulated could be from federal or could be from state sources, not city sources. So we cannot account the money which they have put in their fund balance in the city books. So that is why I think it'll be a slippery slope.
Okay.
I think they have to return
I
any
don't think that's
federal
accurate.
or state surplus. Isn't that correct?
I mean,
There are a few exceptions.
Okay.
I agree with Suhas. You don't want to have that slippery slope. So let's not even accounting wise. Let's keep it separate.
And again,
They're float.
as I said last week, it's y'all's decision. I mean, my recommendation would be that it come from their fund balance, that they use that, draw that down. You've decided to give them the funding. It's, again, it's simply a matter of, where y'all want to take it.
Okay, and my last question, because I'm going to come in at different angles here, and this is another one. So according to your book, unreserved fund balance, part of the definition, it includes only reserved for spending. Funds are only reserved for spending, right? That's part of the definition of unreserved fund balance.
Again, fund balance is that difference between accounting or assets and liabilities. What fund balance ends up being in a governmental entity is an accumulation of unspent funds.
Right.
So we tax, we get our sources of revenue in, we don't spend as much as we get in. That's a good thing. We build up a fund balance. At some point, you need to, you quit taxing because you have sufficient money to cover your operations. From a hypothetical standpoint, it doesn't work in reality because taxpayers would go nuts. You start each year with zero and you say, okay, we need $10 million for expenses. We're going to levy $10 million of tax. You do that, you cut off that year. Again, you can't do that. You all saw the effects less than 2 years ago of having to borrow $4 million until tax money came in. But again, in theory, but the problem is when you have significant increases, you're going to, to increase the tax rate significantly in 1 year,
Right.
Taxpayers don't like that. They want to see a relatively level tax rate, and the fund balance having a sufficient fund balance allows you to do that.
And our unreserved fund balance, then, does it fit the definition that we have right now that we're building up?
Again, we have a fund balance to maintain the 15%. We're a little bit over that, but as I mentioned, we're looking out to the future when our expenditures go higher. We're going to have a higher fund balance unless you change the 15% requirement that you set. And again, as that's not a law. We were under that until June 30th, 2014. We were severely under that amount, and we've just gotten over that. So that fund balance is an amount that really hit that 15% has been set by you. So the way I look at it, technically that's not, it is unreserved, but it's not available for appropriation,
Right.
that 15%. So it's only any amounts, an incremental amount on top of that 15% that would technically be available for appropriation. But for the same reason we're talking about this with schools, it's not an ongoing source of funding.
Right, it's not. So when we were taking anticipation loans out, that $4 million a year, let me think. We're kind of putting this, if we take your argument of using the school's $3 million or 2.6 that they have left, we're putting them in the same position that we were in.
But we
Aren't we?
fund.
But we would- they'd have-
we're
we would be funding them.
at the beginning.
Yeah.
So they don't have that shortfall at the beginning of the year.
Okay, got it. Good, Suhas.
I'm going to just wait for that. For the
What are we trying to show?
So I just wanted to look at, like, the school budget, which Brenda presented. There were a couple of capital items,
Okay.
So I just wanted to, like, ask some questions related to that.
Can I say one thing? Gary, I understand your configuration with the fund balance and the angle you're coming at it, but I'm okay with the schools having a small fund balance. I don't see no issue with it. I understand the logic you're behind. I trust the school board. I think they can juggle a little bit of numbers back and forth if something happens, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I think they should be commended for having saved this money and put it in a reserve, honestly. And honestly, I don't,
That last week.
I beg your pardon?
I think I said that last week.
Yeah,
I
okay.
Give them credit for setting money
Yeah.
aside.
So I don't understand the reluctance to use proffers for school, because the growth and the development in the city has contributed to the growth in the schools. I mean, they're experiencing the effect of what they need the proffers for.
So,
What point do you want to make, Suhas?
yeah, I was just trying to find out, like, maybe if you look at this one, as Gary was mentioning, proffers is more geared towards, like, capital expenditures. Whereas, the transfers are geared towards more of operations, correct? So, if you look at the trend, many of the items, which the schools have been using from, whatever the funds, they had accrued, they're using it for capital. If they could change that, in the Army and DOD, when we talk about color of money, so if we change the color of money, most of these, they could have asked us, to fund it from proffers. So I actually see that, for 2016, like the bus lease purchase or capital replacement or technology, all of those are all capital expenditures, so that those should be, paid from the proffer. It makes sense to me. So I don't see, I don't know why there is such a reluctance, when to use the proffer money. I'm just asking, the governing body. I would encourage, that we take some of the proffer money, especially since we have not spent any of the money from the proffers, which is basically meant to mitigate impacts of all the developments, which have been approved by the governing body. I mean, I would strongly encourage, the governing body to consider, taking the proffer money and then, giving some of the money, to the schools, because this is for their capital improvements. There are other capital improvements, which we will have to undertake, based on some of the discussions which we've had in the past several months. Last 2 weeks ago, we just spent $500,000 from the proffer money for the Signal Bay Water Park. I think,
Yes.
Their
request is much more lower than
Just
that.
be careful there, because that 397,000 or 79,000, that's been on the CIP as an urgent project for at least 3 fiscal years. So I just want to be careful with that argument, because an argument that says, how could we possibly do that this year and not spend it somewhere else, is reciprocated with an argument that said, how could we have spent something the last 2 years and not addressed this urgent need? So I just want to be
Yeah,
take
I know,
caution
I know.
with that argument.
Well, I don't think he's talking about an either-or kind of thing.
It was brought up as, and the tone I detected was, how could we do that with these other expenditures pending? I just want to take caution in that argument.
Yeah, what I was basically saying, 2 weeks ago, we approved, spending $500,000 towards that capital expenditure project. So what I'm urging is governing body to take, $330,000 or whatever the delta is from our proffers and then spend on the school capital projects is all I was making. So comparison.
Mm-hmm. I agree, but I like the scrutiny we're applying to this, because we're thinking it through, we're deliberating, looking at all options here. But I agree with Suhas.
Okay, Gary, yeah, what else? You were walking us through something, right?
Oh, I just, again, it's a recommendation that I have, that it come from fund balance. And I think I've said on more than once The problem is, and Kristen and I discussed this yesterday, either one of these sources are one-time money, whether it's proffers or whether it's fund balance. And again, the discussion earlier of we've got to fix problems. We have the same problem on the city side. We're using these one-time monies for operating costs, and down the road, again, hopefully things will get better. So, like I said, whichever side you take it from, again, I think there's not a question that the schools need it. So I'll leave it at that.
And may I say something?
Please.
I think, yes, that's true, what Gary said, but I do believe that we have a responsibility. We have an ethical responsibility to fund the schools. And I think we have an ethical responsibility to divert proffer money into the schools because they have experienced growth. That is a classic example of what proffers were designed to do and what proffers are designed to be spent upon the school system.
Okay. But Gary makes a good point, and if we use the proffer dollars for the schools combined with, because as Brenda mentioned earlier, that every year we come to the table and we're trying to negotiate on a number. If we can meet later on and discuss on a revenue sharing agreement and a vision in terms of what we want to do long term, then we've got that plan along with, ability to use proffer dollars. I think we've got something going for the future, so we can have an agreement and have expectations for the future and certainty, because there's a lot of uncertainty year over year in terms of funding from both sides. We don't know what they're going to ask. They don't know what we're going to give. So we've got to have that meeting, not only fund this year.
So I want to go back. Is Gary in the room? Or
He's here.
Gary, can you clarify? So I made the comment last year that my thought was the $4 million in proffers that we got.
The upfront proffer was $4.5 million.
$4 million.
And change.
Yeah, and what's our total proffer balance
The total we expect to receive?
now? Assume that $4 million because we got that right.
Yeah, I don't know the number. I mean,
Okay.
it's $4 million. Yeah, $4 million.
But several million of that has been appropriated for capital projects in FY15, and another couple million is being requested for capital projects in FY16. So at the end of FY16, we had anticipated what a balance of like
At the end of FY15, and again, it's
What page?
page 41 of your budget, we are projecting to have a little over $2.8 million of proffers left. Now again, that's in addition to that 2.8 million left, as noted at the bottom part, there's 3.3 million's transfer, that went to the general fund. And then there's 484,000 been transferred over to NBTA, our local fund, that's funding sitting there awaiting
That was a
use.
requirement, right?
So I guess the answer to your question, there's $2.8 million projected to be available.
Okay. You got page 3 handy?
Yes, sir.
So what do we attribute our spike this year? The big spike we've been talking about for 3 years. It's debt service, right?
Oh, yes, sir.
Right? It's these two lines, transfer to debt service city, transfer to debt service schools, correct?
Yes.
Is it the 1.8 and the 4.5 going to 2.1 and 5.8? Is that the increase? Is that the spike?
That's most of it. Again, we've reduced that by about $500,000 for the anticipated refinancing.
Refinancing. Okay. So debt services, that's $1.6 million of our problem this year, right?
It started out at 1.9 million.
Right.
Was the 2016 delta.
Right. So this is where my original expectation was to put proffer money towards this, to offset the spike so that we could operate normal operations, normal capital to the extent it can be normal these days, exclusive of that spike. Again, about $1.3 million is school debt bump, and about $300,000 is city debt bump. So that would be a way to allocate proffered dollars to uses that serve the entire city, and presumably free up dollars that would otherwise not be available for operating or other capital expenditures, right?
Yes, sir.
So I just want to, it really is the color of money, right? I want to be careful about what we are or aren't applying from what bucket to what capital need or what operating need. There's a real opportunity to spend $1 million. Not necessarily suggesting we do that before you fall over there. To shave off a real spike in the entire city's obligation this year that would presumably bring down the net obligation. So another thought is a way to mix it up with debt that serves an appropriate proffer use. It serves the entire city, including the schools, and it doesn't get into this raging debate about the color of money.
And I will go back, and again, this is somewhat this is a professional comment, but it's also my personal opinion. I mean, this city, again, we're not in a state where the schools are separate taxing authority. They are under the umbrella of the schools. You can say there's this pot of money, there's that pot of money, and again, the schools have their state and federal money, but the local monies is, we've got to do everything that the city needs to do, including the schools. And y'all know this. I'm not telling you anything. So again, from that regard, I guess I go back to yes, I recommend it come from fund balance, but this is all one pool of money. I mean, it's all city funds that needs to go for city needs. And I've talked before, as a homeowner, our property values are contingent on not just good schools and not just, if police suffer, if fire suffer, people want everything. And again, depending on who you ask, I mean, if somebody has little kids, they want great, or school children, they want great schools. Senior citizens, again, if they're homeowners, they want good schools too, because they know it attributes value to their property. But there are places in the country I've seen where senior citizens ruled and they voted down school bonds and school debt, and it decimated communities and decimated the property value. So, but again, we need it all, and that's part of the problem. We have all kinds of needs with limited resources.
Gary, can you work up some numbers? I mean, it concerns me that we would spend, did you say $1 million in proffers?
I didn't say I was suggesting it. I'm saying
possibility.
If you spend $1 million, you could distribute that to meet multiple needs across the city.
But that would just be this year.
Sure.
And I think what we're saying is you can give $333,000 3 times over instead of doing the $1 million this year. I'm a little concerned that we're going to whack $1 million like right off the bat.
Yeah, and I'm not wedded to $1 million. I'm just saying, our problem this year is due to a $1.6 million increase in debt service.
Right.
That's our problem.
Right. Yeah.
Everything else happens every year, right? Chillers go bad, pools break.
No, and is this going to affect our bond rating?
No, our bond rating looks good, and I think should, hopefully go up a notch the next time we talk. We're in much better.
Already have our reserves set aside.
Sure.
Yeah, we have our reserve set aside, but we gave them a certain amount. I think it was, $5.5 million we projected, and we're going to tell them now it's half of that, even more, right? Is that right?
Our fund balance is
is?
It's 15.7, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah, our percentage is where well over where it needs to be.
Okay.
So, no, we're in good shape there.
Okay.
The proffer funding, that we were getting 4.5 million, and they were relying on that, or that we were relying on that to get our fund balance where it needed to be. We've done that. That's accomplished, and that was, I want to say, goal one from the governing body with what to do with those proffer dollars, get fund balance reestablished, and that's done and accomplished.
That's done.
So it sounds like we're all in agreement we're going to use the proffer dollars. Is that right? Is there anyone that are reluctant?
I mean, I think it feels like we're going to use proffer dollars this year. I think we're just arguing over what to call it.
We can legally use the proffer dollars.
Yeah, sure, we can.
That's the purpose of proffer dollars, is to.
To Jeanette's point, we don't want to take a big swath of it,
Right.
but it does make sense to use it for capital needs, whether they're operating capital or debt service.
And again, I should have said this before. Either way you go, this does not affect the city's general fund. It will come out of the proffer fund budget, or it will come out of the school's fund budget. So if there's not a concern that this specific item will not affect city general fund.
Gary, was there anything else you wanted to highlight? We had a couple other changes here. I know we're disputing Prince William County's last-minute bump of $100,000. They're trying to stick to us.
Now, these are, the changes from the proposed budget. I tried to summarize them there, and then I didn't give you all of the detailed pages because I figured we will have more changes, but tried to highlight in summary what those changed. Again, some of these you're aware of. I don't want to walk through them unless if y'all have specific questions.
What are the big things that are still outstanding? Are there any big question marks from federal, county we should be, okay?
No. So I hope
Okay.
not.
Okay.
That $100,000 was a big hit, and we have put in, and again, this is the revised proposed budget, a transfer from proffers to debt service to your point, to help shave that peak in 2016, and that's, you'll see, I don't know, midway down the page under reductions in general fund, $200,000. It will reduce that transfer from the general fund to the debt service, and then in the proffer fund, there will be a $200,000 transfer to the debt service fund, and assuming we would also revise the proffer fund if that's the decision, to transfer $333,000 to the school's operating fund.
Yep. I think that's what I hear. If we're okay with it, we should probably go and ask Gary to make the change here on page number 41 to reflect the $330,000, and also on page number 3, that would mean you would be changing the number for the transfer to school board from 11.5 to 11.8 something.
That would not change that would not change the number from the general fund.
Okay.
It would be from the proffer fund. That $333,000 would.
Would that be a separate line item
on
under the
page 41? Yeah, if you look at page 41 on transfers, right now there's general fund, which there's not any for 2016, but the NVTA local fund, the capital projects fund, there'd be school operating fund, or if we want to call it schools.
School transfers.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you okay with that?
I'm not ready to commit to it. I'm fine with it being a line item as part of shaping, so all of our budget discussions are to shape what's ultimately put on the table and approved, right? So
Yeah, it would just be budget guidance at this point. Anyway, nothing would be final until you adopted the budget.
Sure. So let's include that and see how it looks.
Yeah. So as we're shaping this, I think probably you will make changes to this one and send it to us so we can replace the pages with the updated pages, right? That is the idea.
Yeah, although I kind of like this structure, changes,
Okay.
the summary, because hopefully there aren't many more, but this was kind of what you, yeah, ultimately, before we get final,
Sure.
I would agree, but this is helpful because this shares the things that I know you've been working, again, the Prince William County. I know you're looking at scenarios to try to provide some type of cost of living increase to city employees.
And
This is helpful as a delta.
that number is in there.
Yeah, I saw
COLA.
that.
You can,
Right.
again, it hasn't been decided. When you see, for right now, we put it in the governing body budget just as a line item. Again, how it's going to be divvied up, I think, will be Kim's recommendation to you for y'all to approve.
Maybe this shapes up as a summary of the things that you're sort of nailing down as recommendations in the summary of things. I think in the past, we've had things where we sort of like, here's the summary, here are the options, here are the impacts. And
Right.
these are the 2 or 3, I'll call them big things, Kim, that you really need us to focus on shaping down. Is that a reasonable way to do it?
And that would be, and Gary, chime in if I'm forgetting anything, but the big decisions here that I see you guys making are this decision about where the school money, the additional school money is coming from. Decision on how to use those, the proffer dollars for all of the capital improvements that are being requested that are in that budget. If they are approved, that would come from proffer dollars as well. So you'll really need to look at those capital projects and try to decide which capital projects you want to fund.
Which I think is why you want to look at the IT capital improvements, right?
And the
IT capital.
And the IT capital needs
skate
to.
park.
And the COLA, that's a decision that you guys are going to need to make, whether or not you want that left in there or taken out.
I have a
Those
question.
are kind of the executive
Yeah,
level.
please, Jenna.
Question. Do the schools need to know whether it's the 333 plus change is going to be proffer dollars or the source of that by May 15th in order to offer the contracts? Is there any connection? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is good. I mean, I don't get everything I want. I wanted the business development position, but I think I'm the only one up here who is advocating for that.
Only one.
Oh, I've got Kim. Because I think that moves us forward. But I understand that it's not about getting everything you want, but working together and moving the city forward. So,
I think we're talking about needs versus needs.
right. And there's other needs ahead of what I thought was a need or necessity.
I support the economic development as well.
Oh, thanks. I'm not lonely. That's good.
Okay.
All right.
All right, Gary, thanks. Thanks for the questions. Thanks, Kim. Anything else to add?
At this point.
Okay. No other business for regular meeting? I think we have a closed meeting?
All right.
Yeah, go ahead, Dean.
All right, I recommend the governing body go into closed meeting to discuss the assignment, performance, demotion, and salaries of specific public officers and employees of the city, to discuss the acquisition of real property for a public purpose, and to consult with the city attorney regarding 2 legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by the city attorney pursuant to paragraphs 1, 3, and 7, respectively, of subsection 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? How about closed meeting